My son sued me for $600,000. He claimed I owed him a mansion. He told the world I was selfish. He was ready to destroy me to get what he wanted. But he forgot one thing. You don't spend 40 years fixing broken things without learning how to spot a lie. The smell of roasting chicken usually calmed me. Rosemary and garlic. It was the smell of Sundays. The smell of Martha, my wife. She's been gone 5 years. I kept the tradition alive. It was the anchor of my week. Stability. Family. But that Sunday, the air felt different. Heavy. Thick. Like the pressure before a storm. The aroma felt suffocating in my quiet dining room. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. If you're listening to this story, subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. It helps more than you know. I looked across my old oak table, the table Martha and I saved for months to buy. Solid, real. My son Ethan sat across from me. Beside him was his wife, Chloe. They were glowing, radiating an energy that felt too bright, too intense for my modest home. They looked like they had just won the lottery, and I had a sinking feeling. I knew who bought the ticket. My daughter Sarah sat next to me. She stirred her iced tea. Clink, clink, clink. The ice against the glass was the only sound. She felt the tension too. Her silence told me everything. She was watching, waiting. I'm a mechanic. 40 years running my own shop. My life is built on tangible reality. Engines, transmissions. I know the value of $1 because I earned every single one. Busted knuckles, grease under my fingernails. I understand how things work. And I know the danger of debt. Debt is rust. It eats away at the foundation until everything collapses. Dad, we have the most incredible news, Ethan announced. He hadn't touched his food. I had spent all afternoon preparing it. He looked like a kid on Christmas morning, excited, eager. Chloe beamed. She placed her hand on Ethan's arm. Perfectly manicured nails. Sharp, red. We did it, George. We finally found it, the perfect house. I smiled. I genuinely tried to share their joy. I wanted them to be happy. That's wonderful news, Ethan. Tell me about it. Where is it located? I expected him to name the new development across town. Nice homes, sensible. Chloe didn't wait for Ethan to answer. Her voice was smooth, triumphant. Oakwood Estates. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. Sarah stopped stirring her tea. The clinking ice went silent. Oakwood Estates wasn't a neighborhood. It was a statement. It was where the CEOs lived. The surgeons. Massive, sprawling properties. Manicured lawns. 3-car garages. It was a galaxy away from what Ethan, a mid-level marketing manager, and Chloe, who ran a small online boutique, could afford. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just ambitious. It was madness. Oakwood? I said carefully. I tried to keep my voice neutral. That's ambitious. Ambitious wasn't the word. Insane was the word. We got a great deal, Ethan rushed to explain. He was talking too fast. Selling me something. And it's an investment, Dad. An investment. The word sounded hollow. False. It's got 5 bedrooms, Ethan continued, his eyes wide with excitement. A huge home office. A pool. A pool. Ethan barely swam. It's the perfect place for when we start a family, he added. A family they didn't have, with money they didn't earn. They were spinning a fantasy. But the biggest shock was still waiting in the shadows. We closed yesterday, Chloe added, her eyes sparkling like diamonds, cold and hard. We start moving in next week. They had already bought it. A cold knot formed in my stomach. They hadn't consulted me. They hadn't asked for advice. They had committed to a debt that staggered the imagination, a debt I knew they couldn't pay. Well, congratulations, I managed. The smile felt frozen on my face. That's a very big step. A very big step off a very high cliff. And I had a terrifying feeling I knew who they expected to be their safety net. Me. We finished the meal. The talk was strained. Artificial. They talked about Italian marble countertops, landscaping plans, heated floors. I talked about the weather, a carburetor I was rebuilding at the shop. We were speaking different languages. They spoke the language of spending. I spoke the language of saving. The gap between us felt wider than the table. It felt like a canyon. I cleared the plates. We moved to the living room for coffee. I poured the coffee. My hand shook slightly. The cup rattled against the saucer. Sarah noticed. She looked worried. The bright chatter faded, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. The atmosphere shifted. The air felt charged. This was it. The reason for the visit. The setup. The ambush. Ethan reached into his expensive leather briefcase. A briefcase I bought him when he graduated college. The irony was painful. He pulled out a thick stack of papers, bound by a heavy metal clip. He placed it on the coffee table between us. It landed with a heavy thud, the sound of a trap snapping shut. I looked down. It was the mortgage agreement. Below it was a breakdown of the closing costs, the required initial payments. The numbers were huge. Obscene. "What's this, Ethan?" I asked. I knew the answer. The cold knot in my stomach already knew. I just needed to hear him say it. I needed to see if he had the nerve. I needed to hear the betrayal in his own voice. Ethan leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious, almost rehearsed, like he had practiced this moment. Chloe moved closer to him. A united front, a firing squad. "Dad, we need your help," Ethan said. His voice was low, firm, no hesitation. "With the down payment and the initial payments. Just until we get settled. Just until we get settled." As if this was a small loan for a used car. I stared at him. I looked at the papers. At the bottom line, the total amount required immediately, $600,000. $600,000. The air left the room. I couldn't breathe. The silence stretched, taut, breaking. Chloe reached out and put her hand on mine. Her touch felt cold, calculating, like marble. "George, we know you have the money," she said. Her voice was sweet. Too sweet, like poison. "You've lived so simply all these years. You and Martha saved everything." She used Martha's name, like a key, trying to unlock my vault. "It's just sitting in your investment accounts," she added. They knew about my accounts. They had planned this. That realization hit me harder than the amount. The cold calculation of it all. Ethan continued, his voice gaining confidence. He saw my shock. He mistook it for weakness. "You've saved enough, Dad. It's time to help your family. We need this house. It's our future." Then came the kicker. The words that twisted the knife. "We deserve this." It wasn't a request. It was a demand. They looked at me not as a father, but as an open bank account, an ATM. $600,000. It was nearly everything I had. My safety net. My retirement. 40 years of sacrifice. 40 years of Martha cutting coupons. 40 years of driving old cars, gone in an afternoon, for a mansion they didn't need. For a status symbol. "Ethan," I said. My voice was quieter than I expected. The shock was paralyzing. The money I have saved, that's my retirement. That's for when I get sick, or if I need long-term care. I looked him straight in the eye. I searched for the boy I raised. I saved it so I wouldn't be a burden on you kids. I thought that would matter to him. I thought that would reach him. I was wrong. "We know, but you have plenty," Chloe interrupted. Her sweet tone sharpened. The edges were razor sharp now. The mask was slipping. We checked the figures. My stomach turned. "We need this money now, George," she insisted. "You don't need that much." Then she insulted me. Casually, cruelly, the way you might dismiss a servant. "You live like a hermit." A hermit. In the house I built with my own hands. The house filled with memories of his mother. The house where I raised my family. The insult stung deep. "I can't do that," I said. I shook my head. The reality of their recklessness was staggering. "That's impossible. You should have talked to me before you bought a house you couldn't afford." The truth hung in the air. Ugly. Undeniable. And they hated me for saying it. Ethan stood up. He towered over me. His face flushed red with anger. The hurting son was gone, replaced by a stranger. A stranger wearing my son's face. "Couldn't afford, or you won't help," he shouted. The volume was shocking in the quiet room. "Dad, you're being incredibly selfish." Selfish. The word hit me like a physical blow. Me? Selfish? After everything I had sacrificed for him? Selfish? I repeated. The word tasted like ash. "Ethan, how can you say that?" Sarah finally spoke up. Her voice trembled with emotion. "Dad has given you everything. Stay out of this, Sarah, Chloe snapped. Her eyes were like ice, her voice venomous. You're just jealous you didn't ask first. Jealous? Sarah worked as a teacher, lived in a small apartment. Never asked for a dime. They thought this was a game, a race to empty my accounts. The absurdity was staggering. I'm saying I will not bankrupt myself for a mansion in Oakwood Estates. I stood up too. My own anger finally broke through the shock. My legs were shaking, but I stood firm. You made a reckless, foolish decision, I shouted, my voice cracking with rage, and now you expect me to pay the price. I pointed at the papers on the table. This is your mistake. Not mine. Some father you are, Ethan spat out. The contempt in his voice was devastating. Then he went for the nuclear option. He used Martha. He used my grief. Mom would have helped us, he said, his voice cold. Mom would have wanted us to have the best, using Martha's memory to guilt me, twisting her love into a weapon. It was lower than I thought he could go. It was unforgivable. Don't you dare tell me what your mother would have wanted, I said. My voice trembled with rage. The room seemed to shake with it. She would have told you to live within your means, and to respect the hard work that built this family. Martha valued honesty. She hated debt. She would have seen right through them. We're leaving, Chloe announced. She grabbed her purse. It was designer. Expensive. If you change your mind, George, you know where to find us. She paused at the door. Her eyes narrowed. Her final threat was cold, calculated, meant to break me. But don't expect to see us anytime soon. And frankly, I'm not sure I want my children around such a cold-hearted, selfish grandfather. The threat was clear. Give us the money, or lose your family, lose your future grandchildren. Blackmail, they stormed out. The slam of the front door echoed in the empty house. The sound of a family breaking apart. The smell of rosemary suddenly made me sick. I sank back onto the couch. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The silence in the house was deafening. Sarah put her arm around me. Dad, I'm so sorry, she whispered. Tears streamed down her face. I was numb, trying to make sense of it, trying to find an excuse for my son. It's Chloe, I muttered. She's changed him. He wasn't like this. My Ethan wouldn't do this. He's a grown man, Dad, Sarah said gently. Her eyes were sad, wise. He made that choice. She was right, and that hurt the most. He chose the money over his own father. He chose greed over love. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, in the living room Martha loved. I thought about the vacations we skipped, the old cars we drove, until the wheels fell off. The clothes Martha mended instead of replaced. We were careful. We were responsible. We saved for a rainy day. And now Ethan wanted to cause a flood. He wanted to dismantle it all in one afternoon. For a swimming pool and Italian marble.
I thought they just needed time. Time to cool off.
Time to realize how insane their demand was. I waited for the phone call, the apology, the admission that they had gone too far. The call never came. The admission that they had gone too far. The call never came. The silence was worse than the shouting. Instead, the pressure mounted. The siege began. The nightmare was just beginning. Ethan called on Tuesday. I was at the shop, trying to focus on a transmission rebuild. The smell of burning fluid filled the air. His tone wasn't angry anymore. It was desperate. Dad, please, he pleaded. The sound of his voice twisted my heart. We're desperate. The first payment is due soon. We need the money. Just help us this once. He sounded scared. But was it real? Or just another performance? I didn't know my son anymore. Ethan, I told you no, I said. My voice was tired. Steady. You need to sell the house. Get out of the contract. Cut your losses. I was trying to save him from himself. We can't, Dad, he cried. We'd lose the deposit. We'd be ruined. Ruined. He didn't know the meaning of the word. Ruined was not losing a deposit on a mansion. Why are you doing this to us? He whispered. A guilt trip again. He hung up before I could respond. He blamed me for his disaster, for his own mistakes. The audacity was breathtaking. Chloe called the next day. Her approach was different. Cold, calculating, cruel. George, We've been talking to some people, she said. Her voice dripped with false concern. It made my skin crawl. They suggested that perhaps you aren't thinking clearly lately. My blood ran cold. I knew where this was going. They then maybe need someone to manage your finances for you, she continued smoothly. We wouldn't want you to make any more rash decisions with your money. It was a threat, a veiled threat of conservatorship. They were suggesting I was incompetent, senile, my own son and his wife, plotting to take control of my life, my freedom, my dignity. I am thinking very clearly, Chloe, I said. My voice was cold and steady. I wouldn't let her hear my fear. And I will not be bullied. I hung up. My heart pounded. Fear mixed with indignation. How could they be so cruel? How could Ethan let her do this? They weren't just greedy. They were dangerous. They were willing to destroy me to get what they wanted. The week dragged on. I felt isolated, alone, ashamed. The shame of the situation kept me quiet. I only told Sarah, my son is trying to extort me. Who says that out loud? I felt like a failure as a father. I hid in my shop. The familiar smell of oil and metal was my only comfort. The routine kept me sane, but they wouldn't let me hide. They were coming for me. On Saturday, I was at the shop. The bell above the door jingled. I wiped my hands on a rag. I walked out to the front desk. It was a man in a cheap suit. He held a thick envelope. He looked bored, indifferent. George Harrison. Yes. He handed me the envelope. He didn't look me in the eye. You've been served. He walked out before I could respond. The words hung in the air. Served. Like I was a criminal. The bell jingled again. Mocking me, I closed the shop early. I went home. The house felt empty, cold. A tomb. I sat at the kitchen table. The envelope sat in front of me, taunting me. I opened it with trembling fingers. The paper felt heavy. Official. Final. Plaintiff. Ethan Harrison and Chloe Harrison. Defendant George Harrison. They were suing me. My own son was suing me. The words blurred on the page. My heart shattered into a million pieces. I read further. The blood drained from my face. They were suing for the $600,000. Their claim was something called promissory estoppel. They alleged that I had repeatedly promised to help them buy their dream home, that I had always assured them I would take care of them, that they relied on that promise when they signed the contracts for the house in Oakwood Estates. They also claimed intentional infliction of emotional distress. Because I said no, it was a lie. A blatant, twisted lie. I never promised to fund a lifestyle I never even lived myself. I promised to love him, not to bankrupt myself for him. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in my chest. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the fact that my son was willing to lie, to steal, to destroy me. He saw me as an obstacle, not a father. I called a lawyer, David, an old friend of Martha's family. He's specialized in estate and family law. I needed someone I could trust. I needed someone who knew how to fight dirty, because this was going to be a dirty fight. David, it's George, I said. My voice cracked. I need help. My son is suing me. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. David met me at his office. I felt small in his big leather chair. Ashamed, he reviewed the documents in silence. His face was grave, grim.
It's ugly, George, David said finally.
They will argue that your history of generosity established a pattern, an implied promise. Generosity? I protested. I paid for college. I helped with his wedding. That's what parents do. They were using my love against me, twisting my generosity into an obligation. But I never promised them $600,000. I insisted, slamming my hand on the desk. That's insane. They will twist your words, George, David warned calmly. They will paint you as a miserly old man, hoarding wealth while his children struggle. The narrative was already set, the villain and the victims. And I was the villain in my own stories. So they can just take my retirement, based on a lie? My voice cracked. The fear was real now. Tangible. If a judge believes their lie? Yes, David said gravely. The reality hit me hard. I could lose everything. My home, my shop, my future. We need to fight this, George, David said. His voice was firm, reassuring. And we need to fight hard. I'm going to start the discovery process immediately. I want to see their financials. He paused. I have a feeling they are hiding something. People who live this large usually are. I nodded. We would fight. The next few weeks were a blur. Stress, sleepless nights, mounting legal fees. Every check I wrote to David felt like another piece of my security crumbling away. The irony was bitter. I had to dip into the very savings I was trying to protect just to defend myself against my son. The attacks became personal. The smear campaign began. I went to the local diner, a place I had frequented for 20 years. I needed some normalcy. As I walked in, the usual chatter quieted down. People looked away. Avoiding my gaze, I saw my old friend, Mark, sitting in our usual booth. He looked away too. I sat down opposite him. Mark? What's wrong? He stirred his coffee. He looked uncomfortable. Embarrassed, he wouldn't look at me. George, I don't want to get involved. Mark mumbled. But Chloe was here yesterday. She was crying. Chloe? Of course. Her tears were weapons. She said you promised them money, Mark continued, and then pulled the rug out from under them. That they are ruined because of you. But that wasn't the worst part. The real betrayal was still waiting. And she mentioned, Mark hesitated. He couldn't even look at me. That you were getting confused in your old age, that maybe you weren't competent. The rumors of my incompetence, the threat of conservatorship, it was all connected. I calculated strategy. They weren't just trying to take my money. They were trying to take my dignity, my reputation, even my sanity. They wanted the world to believe I was a crazy old man. It was calculated, and it was cruel. They were poisoning the well, turning my friends against me. I felt sick. Betrayed. The isolation was complete. Then came the settlement offer. David called me. They offered to settle. George, he said, $300,000. Half the amount. Half my life savings. They say if you agree, they'll drop the lawsuit, and you can repair the family relationship. Repair the relationship as if it was a fender bender. After they had set the car on fire, no, I said. My voice was firm, stronger than I expected. Not a dime. David paused. George, trials are unpredictable. This is a guaranteed way out. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said. My resolve hardened. This isn't about the money anymore, David. It's about the principle. It's about the truth. David agreed. All right, George, let's see what they are hiding. Because people who offer to settle this quickly are usually hiding something big. We were going to trial, and we were going to expose them. I found myself visiting Martha's grave more often. I needed a place to think, a place to feel close to her strength. The cemetery was quiet, peaceful. What would you do, Martha? I whispered to the silence. They're twisting everything, our whole life together. Martha had been kind, but she was also fierce. She believed in hard work. She believed in honesty. She would have told me to fight, to protect what we built, to stand up for what's right. So I would fight for Martha, for myself. If this story has your heart racing, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Every click helps us keep sharing stories like this, because the truth always comes out. Then, one afternoon, David called me. His voice, usually calm and measured, was buzzing with energy. The energy of a hunter who has found the trail. George, you need to come to my office. Now. What is it, David? My heart pounded in my chest. Hope mixed with fear. We found something, he said, his voice electric. Something big. I was there in 20 minutes. David had stacks of papers spread across his large mahogany desk. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan applications, Ethan and Chloe's financial life laid bare, the truth hidden in the numbers. They claimed poverty, David said. His voice was tight with anger. He was personally offended by their deceit. They claimed they desperately needed this house, that they needed your help to survive. He pointed to the statements. But look at this. The numbers were staggering, shocking.
They weren't just struggling, George, David said. They were hemorrhaging money. Long before they bought that house. They were living a complete lie. I looked closer. The numbers blurred. I felt sick to my stomach. $15,000 vacation to Europe, David read, his voice dripping with contempt. Paris. Rome. $2,000 dinners at high-end restaurants. Designer clothes. Gucci, Prada. He flipped the page. 2 leased luxury cars, a BMW and a Mercedes. Private club memberships. They were living like millionaires, on a mid-level salary, a lifestyle built on sand.
A lifestyle I couldn't even imagine. They have over $200,000 in credit card debt, David said. He shook his head in disbelief. Maxed out. They were drowning. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. It knocked the wind out of me. They weren't buying the house as an investment, I whispered. The sickness rose in my throat. They were desperate. They needed a bailout. It wasn't just entitlement. It was calculated deception. A long con. They'd lied to me for years. They were planning this all along, I said. The realization sickened me. My own son, plotting against me. It appears so, David agreed. They saw you as their retirement plan. The lawsuit wasn't just about the house, David continued. It was about clearing their massive debts and funding the lifestyle they felt they deserved. They deserved. That phrase again. The revelation hardened my resolve. I was no longer just sad. I was angry, furious. I was no longer just defending my savings. I was defending the truth. I was defending the legacy of hard work and honesty that Martha and I had built. I would not let them steal it. The fight was just beginning. As the trial approached, their world started to crumble. The reality of their situation caught up with them. The bank started foreclosure proceedings on the Oakwood house. They hadn't even made the first payment. The dream house was gone. The lawsuit was now purely punitive. They wanted revenge because their plan failed. They wanted to punish me. A week before the trial, I was at the grocery store. I was picking up some milk. George. I turned around. Chloe was standing there. Her face was a mask of righteous anger. In the middle of the dairy aisle, Chloe, this isn't the place, I said quietly. I tried to walk away. I didn't want a scene. Oh, now you want privacy? After you forced us into court? She shouted. People started staring. Carts stopped, whispering, You are a horrible man. She screamed. You promised us. You promised your son, she cried. I did no such thing, and you know it, I said. My voice was steady, low, but my hands were shaking. You're selfish, she screamed. Tears streamed down her face. They looked real, but I knew better now. It was a performance. You'd rather see us homeless, bankrupt, than part with money you don't even use, she yelled. You are destroying our lives. Then she delivered the final blow, the one meant to crush me in public. I hope you die alone with your money. I left my card in the aisle. I walked out of the store, her accusations ringing in my ears. The humiliation burned deep in my chest. But it didn't break me. It fueled me. David warned me that the trial would be brutal. Ethan is your son, George. He's charming, and he knows how to play the victim, David said. We have the truth on our side, but we need to make the judge see the reality behind the performance. I knew it would be the hardest day of my life, but I was ready. The day of the trial arrived. The courtroom felt cold, sterile, the air thick with tension. We had agreed to a bench trial. The judge alone would decide the outcome. I sat at the defendant's table. Sarah sat behind me, her hand on my shoulder, a silent comfort. Ethan and Chloe sat across the room. Ethan wouldn't look at me. He stared at the floor. Shame or strategy? Chloe, however, glared at me with open hostility. The distance between us felt like a canyon. The judge entered, the Honorable Judge Richardson. A stern-looking woman in her late 60s. She had a reputation for being fair, but tough. I had eyes that missed nothing. Their lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Andrews, opened with a powerful, emotional statement. He painted a picture of a devoted son, promised the world by a wealthy but miserly father. He told a beautiful, heartbreaking story, but it was fiction. Ethan took the stand. He was the perfect picture of a heartbroken son, polished. Sincere. He lied under oath, smoothly. Effortlessly, my father always promised to help us, Ethan said. His voice trembled with emotion. He always said, I'm saving this for you, Ethan. I want you to have a better life than I did. He twisted my words. My hopes for him became a binding contract. And did you rely on that promise when you bought the house in Oakwood Estates? Mr. Andrews asked gently. Yes, absolutely, Ethan said. He wiped a tear from his eye. A masterful performance. We trusted him. When he said no, it shattered us. We were trapped. We lost everything. He was good. He was very good at playing the victim. I could see the judge watching him, her expression unreadable. My heart sank. Then it was David's turn. The cross-examination started gently, deceptively calm, a velvet glove hiding an iron fist. Ethan, you described your father as generous. He paid for your college, correct? Yes, he did. So he has supported you. But did he ever explicitly say, I will give you $600,000 on this specific date for this specific house? Ethan hesitated. The first crack in the facade. Not in those exact words. No, he admitted. But it was understood. It was always understood. Understood. David let the word hang in the air. Let's talk about your understanding of your financial situation. His tone hardened. The trap sprung. The velvet glove came off. He pulled out the bank statement, enlarged on a display screen for the whole courtroom to see. Ethan, you testified that you needed this money to secure your future, David said, his voice sharp. But isn't it true that you and your wife were over $200,000 in debt before you bought the house? Ethan turned pale, his composure shattered. Mr. Andrews shot up from his chair. Objection. Relevance. Your Honor, the plaintiffs are claiming financial hardship caused by the defendant. David countered calmly. Their pre-existing financial situation is highly relevant to their motives and their credibility. Judge Richardson nodded. Her gaze hardened as she looked at the screen. Overruled. Answer the question. Mr. Harrison, we had some debts, Ethan mumbled. His eyes darted nervously. The confidence was gone. The victim was exposed as a liar. Some debts? Let's look at these charges, David said. His voice rang with authority. A $15,000 trip to Paris last year. A $7,000 charge at a designer clothing store. A lease on a BMW and a Mercedes. The courtroom gasped. The extravagance was nauseating. Is this what you mean by securing your future, Mr. Harrison? David asked, his voice dripping with contempt. Or is it true that you were drowning in debt and saw your father as a lifeline, a bailout for a lifestyle you couldn't afford? Ethan stammered. He had no answer. The damage was done. The facade was shattered. The truth was out. Chloe took the stand next. She was aggressive. She attacked my character, called me controlling, cold, unloving. But when David confronted her with the evidence of their spending, she broke down. It wasn't a breakdown of sorrow. It was a breakdown of rage. They were just trying to live the life we deserved, she cried. Her voice shrill with indignation. She glared at me, her eyes filled with hatred. George had the money. It was just sitting there, she screamed at the judge. It was supposed to be ours. It's not fair. The life we deserve. That sentence hung in the air. Heavy, revealing, entitled. It summed up everything. Their greed, their complete lack of morality. The courtroom was stunned into silence. Finally, I took the stand. My legs felt weak, but my resolve was strong. David guided me through my life story, my years of hard work, my savings philosophy, my love for Martha, my hopes for my children. I spoke about the value of $1, the dignity of self-reliance, the importance of honesty. Mr. Andrews attacked me during cross-examination. He tried to twist my words. He brought up the rumors of my incompetence, the smear campaign. But I held firm. I told the truth, my truth. My conscience was clear. As my testimony concluded, the courtroom was silent. Judge Richardson looked at me for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable. I held my breath. Mr. Harrison, Judge Richardson said. Her voice echoes in the quiet room. The evidence supports your claim that no explicit promise of $600,000 was made. The law is clear on this matter. I felt a wave of relief, but she wasn't finished. However, family dynamics are complex, she continued, and the pain in this room is palpable. She paused. She leaned forward, her eyes locked onto mine. I have reviewed the history of your generosity towards your son. You have been a supportive father. So I have one question for you. Before I render my final judgment, it is not a question of law, but of conscience. The courtroom waited. Mr. Harrison, Judge Richardson asked, her voice softening slightly. If your son had come to you before buying the house, honestly admitting his debts, confessing his reckless lifestyle, and asking for help to rebuild his life, not a bailout for a mansion, but genuine help, would you have helped him? The question struck the heart of the matter. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about the honesty, the respect. It was about the betrayal. I looked at Ethan. He was staring at the floor, shame finally evident on his face. He knew the answer. He knew what he had thrown away. I turned back to the judge, the weight of 40 years of fatherhood pressing down on me. The tears finally welled up in my eyes. I couldn't stop them. Your Honor, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I loved my son with all my heart. I still do. If my son had come to me in honesty, I continued, the tears streaming down my cheeks, asking for help to fix his mistakes. Yes, I would have done everything in my power to help him. I would have helped him with financial planning, debt consolidation, finding a home they could afford, because that's what a father does. I paused. I took a shaky breath. The pain was raw, exposed. But I will not enable deceit, I said, my voice gaining strength. I will not reward greed, and I will not be bullied into poverty by the very person I spent my life protecting. I looked at Ethan one last time. He was crying now.
Silent tears of regret.
I refused to fund a lie, I concluded. I had to say no, not because I didn't love him, but because I did. I didn't save my life for this. The silence that followed my answer was profound. It was a silence filled with understanding, with shared sorrow. Judge Richardson nodded slowly, her expression solemn. I see, she said. She picked up her gavel. In the matter of Harrison, she announced, her voice firm and final. This court finds in favor of the defendant, George Harrison. The claims of promissory estoppel and emotional distress are dismissed. It was over. I had won. She looked at Ethan and Chloe, her gaze piercing, unforgiving. Retirement savings are not an open bank account for entitled children, she stated firmly, admonishing them. They are a necessity for the elderly, earned through a lifetime of labor and prudence. Then she added the final blow. Furthermore, I am recommending a review of the plaintiff's testimony for perjury. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel felt like a thunderclap. David squeezed my shoulder. We won, George. It's over. Sarah rushed forward and hugged me tightly. She sobbed into my shoulder. I held her, my own tears falling freely now. Relief mixed with grief. I looked across the room. Chloe was sobbing hysterically. Ethan stood up, his face ashen, his eyes hollow. He looked at me. Finally, a look of utter devastation, of profound loss. He knew what he had done. He knew what he had lost. I walked out of the courtroom. The victory felt hollow. I had saved my money. I had saved my future. But the cost was astronomical. I had won the case, but I had lost my son. The aftermath was quiet, but brutal. Ethan and Chloe declared bankruptcy. They lost the house in Oakwood Estates. They had to sell everything, the luxury cars, the designer clothes. The facade crumbled, I heard through Mark, who eventually apologized for doubting me, that their marriage crumbled under the strain. The greed that united them ultimately destroyed them. Chloe left Ethan shortly after the trial. The life they deserved was gone. The silence from Ethan was absolute. For almost a year, I continued working at the shop. I found comfort in the routine, in the honesty of fixing broken things. Things that could be fixed. Sarah visited often. We grew closer, but the hole Ethan left remained. Then, one evening, I was sitting on my porch, watching the sunset. The sky was painted orange and purple, Martha's favorite colors. A car pulled into the driveway. It was an old, beat-up sedan, the kind I used to drive. It was Ethan. He got out slowly. He walked towards me. He looked tired, thinner, older. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a simple shirt. The arrogance was gone, replaced by humility. He looked like the boy I raised, before the greed, before the lies. He stopped at the bottom of the steps. "Dad," he said, his voice rough, uncertain. "Ethan." We stood there in silence for a long moment. The air was thick with unspoken words. Regret. Sorrow. I don't know what to say, he mumbled. He looked at his feet. "I'm so sorry. For everything." "I know," I said. And I did. Chloe left. "We lost everything," he said, his voice cracking. But it wasn't until I lost it all that I realized what I had done. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with the agonizing pain of regret. "I got caught up. I was greedy. I wanted everything so fast. We saw your savings and we felt entitled. It was wrong. The lawsuit," he choked on the word. "It was the biggest mistake of my life. I destroyed everything. I looked at my son. The anger I had felt for so long was gone, replaced by a deep, aching sadness, a grief for what could have been. You did, Ethan," I said quietly. "You broke my trust. You broke my heart. Can I ever fix it?" he asked, his voice trembling. I thought about the judge's question. "I don't know," I said truthfully. "Trust takes a lifetime to build and a second to break. You have a long road ahead of you, Ethan. You need to rebuild your life, your integrity, on your own. You need to understand the value of a dollar earned, not given." He nodded slowly, accepting the verdict. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He hadn't earned. "I understand, Dad," he said. "I'm working again. A small job, but it's honest work." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted you to know I'm sorry, and I hope one day I can earn the right to call you Dad again." He turned and walked back to his car. As I watched him drive away, I realized the true cost of the battle. Money can be saved, but family, once broken, is incredibly hard to mend. I was an old man with a secure future, my savings intact, my dignity preserved, but I sat alone, on the porch, and as the evening chills settled in, I understood that some victories are just losses in disguise. I had won the case, but the silence in my house was a stark, painful reminder of everything that $600,000 had truly cost us. Thanks for listening. Please rate our story in the comments. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. Your support means a lot because your time matters.